This is the coming great deception. This will change everything.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, the occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
Do you think I'm spooky?
Good morning, I'm Roger Grimsby. Today, the entire eastern seaboard is alive with talk of incidents of paranormal activity.
We don't know what the truth is, nobody does.
Do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
This will change everything.
I don't know that anything has actually been released that proves anything. Am I wrong? Oh, so no, nothing's been really released. I think it's just a way to change the conversation.
Paranormal activity.
Why would I make them so uncomfortable?
We've been manipulated to give our power away to that system.
You don't know what the truth is, nobody does.
I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
This is the coming great deception.
Do you think I'm spooky?
Welcome to Truth and Shadow, your guide through the supernatural. I am your host, BT, and this is a Shadow Short. Let's navigate the unknown on this brief journey into the depths of mystery. Alien abduction is one of those subjects that lives everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It fills documentaries, late-night radio shows, conspiracy forums, and there are decades of personal testimony, yet it rarely receives serious theological attention. Most discussions seem to split between psychology, extraterrestrial visitation, or they're dismissed outright. What interests me is that space in between, those commas. So in this episode, I want to examine the alien abduction phenomena from my own tradition, Catholicism. Definitely not to declare every encounter demonic, or even to force an answer. But I'm going to ask what Catholic theology, anthropology, and spiritual discernment might actually contribute to the mystery. Alien abduction. Just saying those words probably puts an image in your head. A dark bedroom, a strange light coming through a window, a figure standing beside the bed. Maybe it's short, thin, gray-skinned. It's got oversized black eyes staring back at you without expression. You try to move, but your body doesn't respond to your mind. You try to scream, but nothing comes out. And then there's this gap. A gap when you come back, you notice something wrong. You notice that the clock tells you hours have passed. Sometimes that's where the story ends, but years later, there are memories of being somewhere else. A room, a table, strange figures standing over you, examinations, procedures, telepathic communication. Some people receive messages about humanity, the planet, consciousness, religion, or where us as humans really came from. It's become such a recognizable part of modern mythology that we almost don't question the categories anymore. We ask simply whether alien abduction is real. But I think that's starting off with the wrong question. If we approach alien abduction through this Catholic theological lens, something interesting happens. Catholicism doesn't actually tell us what these alleged beings are. There is no paragraph in the Catechism explaining greys, reptilians, mantids, tall whites. There's no declaration from the magisterium identifying UFO occupants as demons, extraterrestrials, angels, hallucinations, or any variety of other things. And that might be an important thing to mention. You see, the church does not teach that alien abductions are demonic encounters. It also hasn't authenticated them as extraterrestrial contact, which means Catholics such as me are free to investigate these claims. What we aren't free to do is transform our speculations into doctrine simply because one explanation or another happens to fit into our worldview. Something that's really interesting to me is that Catholic Christianity has spent 2,000 years dealing with claims of extraordinary experiences, apparitions, visions, mystical experiences, demonic manifestations. There's been miracles, private revelations. And one of the principles running through Catholic discernment is remarkably simple. We just simply say that even if it's extraordinary, it does not automatically tell us what caused it. So let's begin with the least extraordinary explanation. Sleep paralysis is real. During the transition between sleep and wakefulness, someone can become conscious while the body's normal REM paralysis remains active. After all, during those states of rapid eye movement, when you're having your dreams, if your body was flailing all about or moving around well, some people are sleepwalkers, but just imagine. Your brain has to paralyze your body, and so you can't move. You may feel pressure. You can experience this overwhelming experience or sensation, even that someone or something's in the room with you. And some people see it. They'll see a shadow, a person, a creature, something standing beside the bed. And it could all be parts of that dream you're in between. And for some people who don't know what's happening, well, it's going to be extraordinarily terrifying. And when you compare that experience with some alien abduction accounts, the similarities become pretty obvious. Some abduction accounts may have completely natural explanations. And you see, Catholicism has absolutely no problem with that. In fact, Catholic discernment traditionally demands that all of the ordinary explanations be exhausted and investigated before any kind of extraordinary ones are examined or even accepted. But suppose that's not every case. Well, then we encounter possibility number 2. What if they are actually extraterrestrials? Nothing in Catholic theology requires Earth to be the only place in creation containing rational biological life. So if tomorrow we discover intelligent creatures living beneath the ice of Europa, Christianity is not going to suddenly collapse. There's going to be some huge theological questions, no doubt. We're going to ask stuff like, are these creatures in a fallen state of existence? Do they share any kind of relationship with Adam? What does original sin mean for a rational species that is not human? What relationship would they have to the incarnation? And these would all be extraordinary theological problems. But there's not going to be any kind of contradictions, not necessarily. We already know God creating rational embodied beings somewhere else in an unimaginably enormous universe is entirely different from claiming those creatures are visiting Earth, entering bedrooms, and abducting humans. The possibility of extraterrestrial life isn't evidence for alien abduction. And this brings us to the third possibility, the preternatural. Catholic Christianity already believes that the universe contains intelligent beings that are not human, angels, God. And angels aren't extraterrestrials. They aren't biological organisms that evolved on another planet. They are spiritual creatures. Yet, Scripture repeatedly describes angelic beings becoming perceptible within the physical world. They appear, they speak, they eat, they interact with humans. And every once in a while in the biblical account, they've been confused or mistaken for ordinary men. But we also know that some of the angels fell, which means Catholic theology already possesses a category for non-human intelligence that can interact with humans in a deceitful way. And that might be where things get a little uncomfortable, because nothing in Catholic theology says a demon has to look like a demon. There's no requirements for horns and tails, no red skin, no odor of sulfur. If fallen angels are intelligent beings, and Catholicism says they are, then deception is not simply lying. It would mean understanding the person being deceived, understanding their expectations, culture, and understanding what that person is prepared to believe. Which raises probably several different questions about alleged alien encounters. I mean, forget what the beings look like for a moment with me here. What are they saying? What do they tell people? I mean, some experiencers have claimed that these entities communicate messages about humanity undergoing a spiritual evolution. Others describe warnings about ecological destruction or nuclear catastrophe. Others report being told that humanity has misunderstood its origins, that superior intelligences have guided us throughout history, and that our religions, well, they're inaccurate, incomplete, and all a misunderstanding of earlier alien contact. Well, suddenly we're not talking about strange lights anymore. We're talking about theology. We're talking about human origins. We're talking about revelation and even salvation. We're talking about who or what humanity should trust. And Christianity has encountered that problem before. Paul writes something extraordinary in Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, where he doesn't say that if an angel appears, its supernatural powers prove that it is to be trusted. No, he says almost the exact opposite, that even if an angel from heaven should proclaim another gospel, reject it. Well, think about the implications of that. The miraculous does not authenticate the message. It's the message itself that must be tested. Paul goes even further in 2 Corinthians 11:14 when he warns that Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light. So Catholic discernment cannot simply say, if it looks like an alien, it is a demon. Well, that's intellectually lazy. But neither can we say, it arrived in something that looked like a spacecraft, therefore, it came from another planet. That's basically making the same mistake. Instead, what we need to do is ask what the intelligence wants. What does it want you to believe about God? What does it want you to believe about humanity? What does it want you to believe about yourself? Does the encounter lead toward Christ? Does Christ suddenly become unnecessary? Does it produce humility? Or the intoxicating belief that you've been selected because somehow you are more enlightened than everyone else? Does it affirm revelation, contradict it? Does it attempt to replace it with something new? Well, that means we arrive at the fourth possibility, the one that I find the most interesting. Maybe there isn't one alien abduction phenomenon at all, one type. Maybe there are several completely different experiences that we've placed beneath the same cultural label. One person's abduction might just be sleep paralysis. Another could involve psychological or neurological factors. Another could be a false memory. You watched the movie Signs, or you watched Fire in the Sky one too many times. The other idea is it could be a fraud. Another might involve some physical phenomena we currently don't understand, either scientifically or theologically even. And perhaps if we could take Catholic cosmology seriously, some could involve something preternatural. That doesn't mean unexplained equals demonic. It definitely does not. But Catholicism doesn't force us into the modern binary where everything is either an alien or a demon. And we don't even have to believe that this little gray man crossed 40,000 light years to perform medical examinations in someone's bedroom. Reality may be considerably stranger than either option because, well, Catholicism says the universe contains matter and spirit, human beings and non-human intelligences, visible creation and invisible creation, good and evil. And perhaps that's why something about the history of these encounters bothers me. Because humans didn't begin encountering these non-human intelligences starting in 1947. No, they've been part of our story for thousands of years. The names change, the appearance change. Ancient people encountered gods and daemons. Medieval people encountered spirits, elves, gnomes, what have you. You've got incubi, succubi, fairies, luminous beings, creatures that carried people away into the fae, there's beings associated with strange sexual encounters, entities that imparted forbidden knowledge. And now we have grays, spacecraft, missing time, medical examinations, genetic experience, telepathic messages. And maybe that's all it is. Maybe human beings have always suffered strange neurological experiences and simply dressed them in whatever mythology their culture provided. A medieval farmer, depending on where they were, saw a demon or an elf. A Victorian saw a ghost. 20th century Americans saw an extraterrestrial. I mean, that's all entirely possible. But there's another possibility. What if the experiencer isn't the only thing changing? What if the phenomena changes too? Because if we're dealing with intelligence rather than simply hallucination, then perhaps we shouldn't expect it to appear the same way in every century. Maybe something trying to communicate or deceive would present itself in a form the observer could conceivably understand. And maybe a technologically obsessed civilization no longer expects visitors from heaven or spirits from another realm. We expect visitors from the stars. Well, that doesn't prove grays are demons. It doesn't prove UFOs or spiritual manifestations. It certainly does not prove that every terrified person who wakes unable to move has encountered anything other than the extraordinary machinery of the human brain. But it does leave us with a lot of questions. And sometimes the questions are more disturbing than any of the answers. Because maybe the real mystery isn't whether something is visiting us. Human beings have been asking that question since we first started telling stories around campfires. And if something really has been standing at the edge of human experience for thousands of years, changing its name, changing its appearance, changing the story it tells us, then perhaps the question we should be asking is not, where are they coming from? But maybe we could ask, what do they want us to believe? Maybe that's the biggest mistake we've made with alien abduction, is assuming that alien abduction is only one thing. Think about what happens when we give something a name. Someone wakes in the middle of the night, can't move. There's someone standing beside the bed, tall, small, humanoid. Maybe they're enormous dark eyes. The next thing they remember, they're somewhere else. I don't know. The clock says 3 hours have passed. We'll call that alien abduction. And once we've given the experience that name, something subtle happens. Every detail that follows gets interpreted through the explanation we've already chosen. The figure we saw wasn't simply a figure, a shadow person or something. It was definitely extraterrestrial. And the room wasn't simply unfamiliar, it was a spacecraft. And the examination wasn't something remembered during an altered state, it was an actual extraterrestrial medical procedure. Missing time becomes evidence of transportation. Strange dreams become recovered memories. Marks on the body become evidence of experimentation. The interpretation slowly becomes indistinguishable from the experience itself. But what I've found in Catholic thought, it gives us a very good reason to pull those two things apart. Because someone can be completely sincere about what they experienced and completely mistaken about what caused it. And those aren't contradictions, and nobody's calling anybody a liar. You don't have to believe someone is lying simply because you don't accept their explanation. But once we understand that, alien abduction becomes considerably more complicated. Catholicism doesn't require us to believe because an experience contains psychological components that everything about that experience must therefore be psychological. You see, Catholic anthropology doesn't understand a human being as merely a brain producing consciousness inside a biological machine. We are embodied creatures, material and spirit. And because of that, Catholicism allows us to consider physical, psychological, and spiritual dimensions without pretending they're necessarily exclusive. Suppose someone experiences sleep paralysis. Well, that tells us something extremely important about the condition, but logically it doesn't prove that absolutely everything perceived during those moments must therefore have been non-existent. Hallucination proves that the human mind is capable of perceiving things that aren't externally present. And it doesn't prove that everything perceived during every altered state of consciousness has no external cause. But here's something to think about that bothers me a little bit, and it involves those stories that contain elements of altered time. And we find them in some pretty old accounts. I mean, in the British Isles, fairy folklore is full of it. Basically, someone enters into another realm and they believe that they've only stepped over there for a small amount of time, only to return and find that hours, days, weeks, and hopefully never years, but amount of time has passed. And then there's something else that's really interesting. Dreams. Dreams can contain what feels like hours of narrative inside a relatively short period of sleep. And we know that alien abduction stories give us missing time. So once again, the phenomena refuses to stay inside of one category. It looks physical, then it's psychological, then it's folkloric and spiritual, and then it's technological. Once you think you've got it contained, something else just spills over the edge, which is exactly why I think Catholic anthropology is useful here. Because modern discussions usually offer us two choices. One, nothing happened. The brain is strange and weird. End of story. Or option two, biological creatures traveled across interstellar space, arrived in advanced spacecraft, and had to use mechanical surgical implements to perform surgery. I mean, gosh, Catholicism doesn't have to accept that as binary. Nobody really does. Because we know that reality includes matter, it includes minds, it includes spirit. We know that human perception can fail, that memory can fail. And sometimes people lie. People can sincerely misinterpret something that really happened. There may be natural phenomena we don't even know. Extraterrestrial biological intelligence very well may exist. And we know within Christianity, spiritual intelligences certainly do. But sometimes the most intellectually responsible answer is, I don't know. And there is nothing unchristian about saying that. In fact, there's something deeply responsible about refusing to claim certainty where the evidence doesn't permit it. But there is one final piece of the abduction phenomena that deserves special attention. What happens when the experiencer responds religiously? What happens when someone invokes the name of Jesus Christ? What happens when someone begins praying? What happens when sacramentals become involved? There are accounts in the abduction literature, especially within Christian UFO research, where experiencers claim that an encounter abruptly ended after they invoked the name of Jesus or prayed. And those stories are often presented as final proof. See, they're demons. But we have to be much more careful than that. Anecdotes are not controlled experiments. There's no placebo side of that. Memory is very complicated. What we know as selection bias is very real and it exists in our minds. Researchers can only collect the stories that support the conclusion they already believe. People who interpret an experience through a Christian framework may remember it differently than those people who don't have any kind of religious framework. And if we care about the truth, we have to investigate those claims with the same skepticism we apply everywhere else. How many cases are there where the accounts recorded before the experiencer encountered the aliens and demons interpretation? Were witnesses interviewed independently? Did prayer constantly or consistently terminate the experience? Were there cases where prayer didn't? Where saying the name Jesus didn't stop it? Is there any kind of physical corroboration? Where medical or sleep-related explanations investigate? And I think all of those questions matter. All those kind of questions belong in our investigative mind because we don't need to live with bad evidence. But if, and that is a very important word, if there really is a consistent pattern where certain apparently intelligent abduction experiences respond specifically to the name and authority of Christ, well, then we've shifted into a different kind of territory. Because a spacecraft malfunctioning when someone says Jesus would definitely be bizarre. A hallucination immediately terminating because a focused prayer could have a psychological explanation. But an apparent independent intelligence reacting adversely and repeatedly to that kind of invocation, I would say that would demand investigation. And not because it's instantly, hey, demons, because it would never prove that. Not conclusively, not instantaneously. But because now the phenomena wouldn't merely be communicating religious ideas, it would be responding to religious authority. And that's a very different claim. So how do you discern the identity of something intelligent that appears from beyond ordinary human experience? How do you know whether it's telling the truth? And what does it mean if that intelligence seems powerful? Maybe the most important question isn't whether the beings come from another planet. Maybe it's whether they're angels or demons. Maybe the question we should investigate first is much simpler. Maybe the mistake is thinking we have to choose between visitors from another world and visitors from somewhere older. Perhaps some encounters are dreams, some are neurological, some are lies, and some remain stubbornly unexplainable. Catholicism doesn't demand that we fill those empty spaces with demons. It simply reminds us that reality may contain more than what our instruments can measure. So I'll just leave you with this. If something really is reaching through the darkness, speaking to us in images our generation understands, perhaps the question isn't whether we're finally discovering who they are. Perhaps we should wonder whether they've simply discovered how to make us listen and to ask, what do they want us to do?
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves when they can. They must fall in line with the person they follow. The terrible thing about searching for the truth is that sometimes you find it.
You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe.
See, the more at peace you become, the less you tolerate chaos. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding.
You want to live that kind of life? I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere.
Protecting your peace isn't about shutting the world out. It's about keeping your inner world clear enough to hear your own soul.
The truth, nothing more.